The Backup is where we talk about the most hard-hitting news of the week, as long as it's related to video games or ninjas' love or hatred of women.
Okay, now.
As usual, the Back Podcast is brought to you by Hero Pocketeer Tim, who loves women, at the Learn Programming Academy. Get your exclamation mark Tims out in the chat, because the Learn Programming Academy offers classes covering an entire range of programming that are easy to watch for all skill levels, and they're almost all $20 or less. Head to lpa.dev/.
For all skill levels, all genders as well. I'm sure Tim will say that as well. No ninjaing here.
I wonder how accurate he is with the all skill levels. Like, if I've never used
he couldn't help me. He could not help me.
Yeah, not many can. Head to lpa.dev/backpocket, still burning about that timer thing, to download the custom backpocket info guide on everything Tim has to offer and become the coding genius you didn't know you always were. Thank you, Tim. Without Tim, we would never know the following news. Like news story number 1, we have the E3 schedule, which is not
sure do
particularly
news.
I mean, yeah, news or fascinating, or I would even say interesting, but it certainly is something. So let's talk about it. Sure. We have the E3 schedule. We know when people are going to be showing off their games. We know where they're going to be doing it, and that is the internet. It's all kicking off on Saturday, June 12th. And I'm not going to give times because I can't do these conversions in my head. It's EDT, it's PDT.
Mate, Summer Games Festival kicks off at AEST 4 a.m.
Good.
The press start guide is the one to look at, and Gat posted it in the E3 Discord as well.
Okay, you show us the times.
Yeah, you list what the publisher is, and I'll say the time when we get.
And I'll make a noise of how excited I am or aren't for it.
Okay, cool.
To get up at that time.
Yeah.
We're starting off with Ubisoft Forward.
Yeah, the Ubisoft Forward is on Sunday, June 13th at 5 a.m. AEST.
That's not too bad. Ubisoft Forward will showcase a variety of upcoming Ubisoft titles, with updates about games such as For Honor, Watch Dogs Legion, and The Crew 2. I feel like there's nothing there that we're particularly like, oh my god, this is the E3 news we're waiting for. The main event, however,
it's going to be the Roller Champs is like out now.
Oh, I genuinely think that it could be the case.
Yeah.
It really could be the case. If not, when? And what the fuck is happening? The main event will feature the first gameplay footage of the next Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six game, a co-op title formerly known as Rainbow Six Quarantine. They will do a deep dive on the game on the Ubisoft Forward post-show. So that's after Ubisoft Forward, which I would call Ubisoft, well, maybe not backward, because that implies like probably a negative connotation.
Ubisoft after.
Ubisoft right here.
So they're going to do the deep dive of that not during their main show. How interesting.
I think they're going to do, like, show off some gameplay, talk about it a bit, but then dedicate a large amount of time of their post-show to breaking it down. Because you know how oftentimes they'll, like, go, you know, here's Greg Miller and Alana Pierce and 2 Ubisoft devs to, like, talk through this stuff and do, like, an extended gameplay.
Also, from everything that we've... From the limited information out about that game, I assume, like, showing a match would probably explain more than a cinematic trailer or something. Like, I think that's the big question a lot of people have had, so... Yeah.
All I can say is I guarantee their post-show is not going to reference Natural Harvest. It's going to be a very underwhelming post-show in that respect.
I think it is appalling that the best content we make is locked behind a paywall. We would be famous if our post show was something that actually we were known for, but also would probably be in prison. We can also expect appearances from previously announced games like Far Cry 6, very excited for that, and Riders Republic, and updates on new content for Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Rainbow Six Siege. And then they're also going to talk a bit about their film and television projects. Maybe some, what's their show? Mythic Quest. And then they've got a movie coming up, The Werewolves Within.
Oh, I saw the trailer for that. It looks really fun.
Yeah,
it does look good, doesn't it?
Like, I didn't recognize any of the mainstream actors, and I had no idea where this was coming from.
Mate. You haven't watched Veep,
mate. Right. Okay, watch Veep. But it looked fun.
Yeah, it does look good. I am really excited for Far Cry 6. I'm really excited for Rainbow Six Quarantine, and I'm really excited to play Riders Republic when they drop it halfway through that show.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to cover on Ubisoft?
No, man.
No, that's
The
everything.
day's only so long. There's a million. There's a million other publishers.
You're right. We'll just burn through this. So I'm looking at Polygon Oku here. They say Gearbox Entertainment, Borderlands developer will hopefully have plenty to show.
Yeah, Devolver Digital and Gearbox are on Sunday the 13th as well. Ubisoft is at 5 a.m. AEST, and Devolver Digital starts at 6:30 a.m. AEST. So those two could probably roll straight into each other. If you're up for 5 a.m. for the Ubisoft, you could jump into Devolver Digital, and their packages are always funny, and they've done for the last couple of years like video package for their
fully tailored with like your sketches and stuff in between. Yeah.
I think that'll be one to wake up for. Gearbox is still to be confirmed time.
Xbox and Bethesda are next up, holding their E3 Games Showcase, and will focus on games from Xbox Game Studio, Bethesda, and many game creators from our partners around the world. Pete, give me a time.
Yeah, so Monday is going to be a good one. Monday, June 14th. I mean, it's early start, particularly in Western Australia, but it's a 3 a.m. Xbox Bethesda is 3 a.m. on Monday, June 14th. Square Enix is at 5:15 a.m. on Monday, and Warner Brothers, including the Back for Blood info, is at 7 a.m., that's 4 hours after Xbox and Bethesda. So I think there's going to be some downtime. If you're up for Xbox, you're going to fall asleep before Square Enix. And if you are like me, you would fall asleep during Square Enix because all their games suck.
Square Enix is perfect time for a nap
to talk about.
Because, you stay up for the Microsoft one, I think. You never went to bed. You stay up for that.
3 a.m. Oh, I'd go to bed.
Stay up for 3 a.m., have a kip, and then wake up a little bit too late for the next one, and then just scrub backwards over it. That's how I work.
Yeah, good. I'm curious as to what's going to happen with how Bethesda are framed within the Xbox One. Like, how I imagine that in 4 years' time, Bethesda will just be like, they won't even have a presence necessarily within there. It'll just be like when a Bethesda game is there, then we talk about the Bethesda game, because we don't want to give Bethesda more weight than the 400 other studios we've bought. But at least for this year and potentially next year, I feel like we're going to get a mini Bethesda conference in the Xbox One.
We could.
Like, Todd Howard's going to be there in a jacket.
We could. I definitely think it's actually going to push forward into that sort of projected future you're talking about, Nick, in the sense of like, I don't think they're going to push the Bethesda games together within that. I feel like they're going to spread them out a little bit, and just that's a way of kind of understanding that they are now part of the bigger system of Microsoft. That's what I put my mind on.
Oh, you reckon?
Yeah, I'd say so. I don't think they're going to try and segment it up.
Yeah, it's also like for Microsoft, a big part of buying into Bethesda is buying a lot of successful IP, and that like often their pillars are Forza and Halo, and I'm sure they're going to have some Halo to talk about and probably have some Forza to talk about, but then it's kind of just like, and I always enjoy the Microsoft showcase, but it's like a bunch of indie little bitsy things usually. There's a Minecraft segment, like, because they own
you
Minecraft.
Forget
so
until
it's
you
like,
see that and go, oh yeah, they own Minecraft.
yeah. So I think like to have a couple of big Bethesda IP to throw in and around. You're right, Gus. It makes sense for the balance and pacing of their show to pepper Bethesda throughout, rather than kind of like doing the Bethesda thing. And the Bethesda thing always felt like such a frat show.
Yeah,
it's like,
totally. Yeah,
the boys are over here with Doom.
And there's always there's like a concert every time where there's some sort of heavy metal band is playing. Though I do think that the one thing is that Bethesda traditionally have a press conference every year and manage to fill an hour with content. So that and sometimes it can feel a little like it's dragging, but presumably if they hadn't been acquired, they still would have done that this year. So how much stuff they want to show off, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Square Enix will obviously also be there. 40-minute show that will feature the announcement of a new game from Eidos Montreal, an update on Platinum Games' Babylon's Fall, a closer look at Life is Strange True Colors and the Life is Strange Remastered Collection, and details on Black Panther: War for Wakanda, the expansion for Marvel Avengers.
I could scrub that after it had been live, I think. I think I have for Square Enix in the past.
Yeah, yes, the Square Enix one is my least interested one every time, for sure.
I do find though that Square actually have like, they're an interesting publisher. They've got a bit of diversity. So if like, there might be one thing in the show for you, but it's actually going to be really cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. Next up, after Square, we have Capcom and Take-Two. Peter Burns.
Capcom and Take-Two. So the PC gaming show is still meant to be on Monday as well, but that's to be confirmed. Capcom and Take-Two are Tuesday, June 15th, and still TBC, according to the schedule.
We're going to be looking at Capcom have the Great Ace Attorney Collection, Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin, which I'm interested in seeing what that is, Resident Evil 4 for Oculus VR, and Pragmata on its release list. But also, apparently, they have more Ace Attorney and Resident Evil games in its plan as well. And Take-Two have a showcase, but there's not too many details out about that.
Wonder if there's anything following up for Resi 8, it'll be a costume or a bit of DLC or something, just off the back of its success. I wonder if they don't.
Well, they did post-release content for 7, which was. But it was fairly like an expansion thing with Chris Redfield, right?
It was. I feel like that came out a considerable amount of time after 7, though. Like, this is so close to the release. But I just wonder if striking while the iron's hot. I'd like to see something else to play in that game. So, yeah. I'd be curious if they say more Resident Evil, if it's anything beyond just like the Resi 4 VR version and something else. Like, yeah, I'd like to see something attached to 8.
I would say that they could put out a roadmap for content for 8 if they're doing that. And also, there have been rumors constantly about not just the VR version of 4, but doing the remake. Remake, remaster, whatever you want to call it, for 2, that they did to 2 and 3, and applying that to 4, or applying that to 1, which would be really interesting as well.
That actually would be the most interesting, I think. But yeah, that'd be cool. I'd like that versus what I sometimes think comes out of there, which is like, now you get weird weapon skins and crazy characters that were never meant to be in that universe that you can now play as that universe. You're like, ugh, wasted.
Yeah. And then we have the Nintendo Direct and Treehouse Live. Nintendo will hold a new Direct presentation where the company plans to reveal new details on upcoming Nintendo Switch games, then offer a longer look at its Switch lineup in a new Nintendo Treehouse Live immediately following the Direct. And apparently they're going to be focusing mainly on software that releases in 2021.
What's the time for that one, Pete? Nintendo's pretty rough. It's 2 a.m. Wednesday, June 16th. And like this whole time, I'm just like, all the jobs we have next week. I'm like, we're not watching any of this.
Totally. We'll need to figure out a way to cover this in a sustainable way.
Yes. I'm cautiously optimistic about Nintendo in the sense that all the chat about the next Nintendo Switch Pro version coming out, just the rumors that we've talked about in the previous week's news, the idea that they've been holding out on showing a lot of the software that's coming out in that time period because they haven't released or they haven't announced what this little hardware update is, or this possible hardware upgrade. So I'm hoping that might tie in together with that. My main one obviously being is Breath of the Wild 2. They were super quiet about that, apologetically quiet in the previous Nintendo Direct, which felt to me like it's going to be optimized for this new system, and I'm totally okay with that. This is me just running rampant with rumors, but I do hope that they drop that console at the start. They're like, big screen, more juice, 4K, all that kind of stuff, and here are the games that you can play on it. That will also come to previous Switch, but we were waiting till we could show them to you in this format. Is my if I was a betting man, I would put money on that and then get too nervous and chicken out before putting money on it, which is how I bet.
You recently won money.
It's like the one time I've only ever won. I've actually decided to forget to withdraw my bet. That's essentially what I did.
That's funny. I am excited for this, not only because of to see what the new hardware is, but yeah, like you said, they've been a bit cagey with their software for 2021, and I certainly have felt. I have felt it. I have felt the lack of Nintendo feelings that with the Switch. Like, the Switch is very much something that I'm playing other people's games on at the moment. So
I think the next first party one is stuff. Sorry, the next first-party one is Golf, and that's pretty much all that's been out this year. I'm trying to remember at the start of the year. I don't think anything massively first-party from Nintendo. So yeah,
Fury.
There was the
Fury.
Oh, Pokemon.
Bowser's Fury, yeah.
Bowser's Fury and Pokemon. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What Pokemon came out? Pokemon was 2 years ago.
Sorry, Pokemon
they
Snap,
announced,
which not first-party, but just kind of like
Pokemon
big tentpole game. Yeah.
You still playing Pokemon Snap, Pete?
No, not really.
Okay. There we go. Good chat. Bandai Namco also have a showcase. No details about what's going to happen with that.
BBC, but that's on Wednesday as well. So they could be the last thing of E3, Bandai Namco.
Oh. Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, they could be. Because EA Play is confirmed for Thursday in the States. And is that Thursday our time as well?
It's probably Friday. It's not even on this list.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Not even considered part of E3 by press start.
Yeah. The bastion of E3. There's also been some leaks when it comes to 2K, which with some interesting stuff as well, of like genuinely new things. Codename Daffodil is apparently a Borderlands spin-off featuring Tiny Tina, with the final name that may be Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which is something that they...
That's a way to get your game killed.
Yep. That Gearbox recently trademarked. The game is said to be in the same style as the mainline Borderlands game.
Oh, good.
Which I'm like,
no more Borderlands ever. No more.
I mean, I like the idea of I like some of these obnoxious characters. There is a charm to some of this obnoxiousness, but just you have to make a different game. You have to progress your video game in a way.
Tiny Tina is like the best character in that series, but she was in Borderlands 2, I believe, and it's like you missed the boat on the capitalizing on how much people liked her. I feel like if only now you're making a standalone game or something just tied to her.
They've also got the film coming.
I was wondering whether or not
the hype for that. Jamie Lee Curtis is tweeting and stuff. So it's a really impressive cast.
Do you reckon Curtis is writing those tweets herself?
Yeah, she's got a lot of spunk. I reckon that is her.
She wrote, because I read the last one.
Or she's got a publicist with her that she just throws something at, and then the publicist spins it a little bit.
They released a still of the casting, or like of silhouettes of all the characters that are going to be in it. I don't know if they were the actors in costume. It did just look like a bunch of cosplayers. It looked like cosplayers when the lights were off. It didn't look overly impressive.
It's going to look like cosplayers when the lights are on, because it's like it's that style of game.
Unless
and cosplayers are excellent.
They should have done like the Scanner Darkly cell shaded treatment on it or something. They should, because otherwise it's just, as you said, going to look like a bunch of actors in some costumes. Yeah. Which arguably is a lot of films, but this one in particular will stand out more.
That's still, I'm just looking at it now. It is shocking how the character in the middle, I could have told you that's Jamie Lee Curtis without you ever even told.
Yeah, we've seen through lies enough.
Yeah, the shape of her head, I didn't realize, but
is she standing on a bed? Is she standing on a four-post bed, whipping her hair back? Because if
she has an iconic shaped head.
Yeah,
and like you could have never told me anything about this, and I would go, "That is Jamie Lee Curtis's dome, 100%." Yeah, cool.
So she can move fast away from predators. Like Mike Myers.
Oh, that's what that's about. Okay, yeah, good.
Did
you say
Michael Myers? Michael Myers.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby.
I was like, is there something about Mike Myers we don't know?
We know everything there is to know about Mike Myers, and you would still run away from it.
Yeah, that's true. We're also 2K are also working on something called Codename Coda, which is said to be a new Marvel-themed XCOM-style turn-based strategy game from Firaxis.
Cool. Very cool.
Which sounds really cool.
No, it doesn't.
Particularly because it's not Square Enix.
But it's going to be like
Dynamics.
Those games are like Firaxis obviously make a good turn-based strategy game, but it's like, what's the Marvel skin of that? It's going to be fucking Agent Coulson or Paulson or whatever his name is going pew over a wall. It's like, that's not fucking interesting. I can't
agree with a part of what Pete's saying, which is that like it's stupid watching heroes that are super active and fluid and they look best just like in full motion stand still and then like get punched and then
you turn Hulk
and then
wait.
Hulk, wait.
I mean, I definitely agree that it is dumb seeing Iron Man standing, waiting to engage in a battle. But those characters all, like, I could see tons of awesome XCOM style stuff of like, Iron Man being the guy that does this. What's the ability of like Overwatch, where he's sort of like scanning and make sure if someone moves, he attacks them while he's floating up there. Thor like throwing a hammer, like
Thor can go around corners with his hammer. Things like that.
Yeah, there you go. The interesting thing about those characters is that they have really cool abilities, and it could be fun putting those abilities in a genuinely like tactics way as opposed to...
I think abilities, yes, but I also think the other thing that's really important in those games is the fact that characters die permanently, because that's what adds the tension. Because otherwise it's just like, I did it wrong. It's chess, and I'll just reset and do it again.
Yeah. And if there's
like
one thing we know from
you can't,
comic books...
Thor can't die.
No, we know from comic books, every character will die and then be brought back 6 different times. So it's just every time they come back, there's just
it all checks out. It all checks out. All my concerns are now quashed.
Yeah, Argon TV in the chat says it's going to be X-Men, I reckon, and I've seen some chat about it potentially being X-Men online, which would be really cool. And also, if I'm going...
a mutant.
Totally,
Send Gambit out there every time to die.
And if I'm going really with no regard as to how difficult it is to make video games, but you start off with like the core X-Men team, and you take a couple of like signature X-Men heroes, and then as you progress through the game, you basically customize and build new mutants so that you have a power set that you can like attach on, because that's kind of what you're doing in XCOM is upgrading these characters into specialties. So that could be really cool as well. So we'll see if that happens. And then finally, Codename Vault is a new action game early in development described as Cthulhu meets Saints Row,
which is the most amazing matchup of like genres and titles. I think I could have come up with that combo in 1,000 years. It's like,
I don't even know.
You know exactly where my mind went. It's just someone beating a squid with a dildo.
Yeah.
And that's a game we all want to play.
I don't know. It's rare that I read sentences where I'm like, I can't picture what that is, but I can't picture what Cthulhu meets Saints Row is. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what part of Cthulhu and what part of Saints Row we're talking about.
I think Pete's right. The squid and the dildo.
Yeah.
That's the only
Which is the working title of The Old Man in the Sea.
The squid and the dildo, the old man in the sea.
That's the sort of charming stop motion film at the beginning of the next Pixar feature. All right, so that is the E3 schedule coming up. We will figure out a way to cover all this information, and we can look forward to getting up. The only thing I don't like about E3 style things is because of where we live and it's all happening overnight, is that thing of like waking up. And I'm that person who wants to wake up and then not just read the dot point thing, but I want to like go through the press conferences and watch it, and then figuring out how to navigate everything, not be spoiled, but also waking up and going, I've got 5 to 6 hours of video content I have to watch while also doing my day.
Now you know how
there's
the
also
people who watch
something
us feel.
That's true. That's true. Good. Okay. Moving on now, and Sony. We've got I've put together a Sony roundup here because there are a bunch of Sony stories where I'm like, this doesn't have a lot of chat in it, but when you put them all together, you've got something. And what you've got is a company that basically gave one interview to a podcast and one interview on their PlayStation blog and dumped a lot of information, really. So it all came from Herman Holst, who is the head of PlayStation Studios, and he gave an interview on the official PlayStation podcast, and then he also gave an interview on the PlayStation blog. And the first piece of info that he dumped is that Sony is not going to abandon the PS4. He confirmed that the 7-year-old PS4 is very much a focus for future game development at Sony. The company can't and won't walk away from the 110 million PS4 owners out there. Quote, I think it'd be very bad news for fans of PS4 and frankly not very good business, he said. For comparison's sake, Sony said it has shipped 7.8 million units of the PS5 as of March 31st. So it's less than 10% of people who bought a PS4 have a PS5. So you would be abandoning 90% of your install base by only focusing on PS5. As a result, Holst said that Sony will continue looking at developing PlayStation games for both PS4 and PS5, and he named Guerrilla Games' Horizon Forbidden West, which Sony previously said would be a cross-generation title, as well as the next God of War game and Gran Turismo 7 as being games that are coming to both PS4 and PS5. Angus, you waited a very long time to get a PS5.
I did.
It turns out you didn't have to.
I didn't have to. No, and I mean, none of this is a huge surprise. The thing that surprises me here is the sort of frankness of the statement that has a little less corporate spin on it than I would expect. In things like language like, we can't and won't walk away. It's like, I would expect someone from his position to say, like, to be a bit more on company brand of like, we will not abandon this audience. We love the gamers and we're all about them. And it's like, no, it's him saying, we can't walk away from this or we'd go bust. It's like, as you said, this is 90% of their install base still has this previous console. So I that was the thing that took me aback a little bit, but the rest of it makes a lot of sense in the sense that these consoles still exist. I've heard a lot of people online and podcasts and all that kind of stuff kick up minor fuss about the idea of like, oh, you're going to hamper the games that we want to be the next gen titles. But for me, it just feels like that line is going to continually get thinner and thinner, or that area will get grayer between console leaps. And I don't think there's a substantial amount of performance that we're going to see lacking out of games, especially from studios like Santa Monica and stuff doing God of War Ragnarok. Like, that's still going to be such a polished game, and it's going to look so good on the PS5, and it's going to look very good on a PS4. I don't think you're going to be able to play it on PS5 and argue that it's hampered in any way. I don't know what that says to the greater development community for those consoles in terms of having to possibly pivot, or if they can afford to make it for both. But yeah, as I said, not a huge surprise, and probably a good thing in the long run, because as we said, there's not enough of the PS5s out there, and they sound like a company who, I mean, the race to make the next console just went a bit too early by the sounds of it. Like, we weren't ready for new consoles. They weren't ready to make them. Well, the developers certainly weren't. So, yeah. No, I'm not surprised. It's my takeaway.
Obviously, the big thing is that install base, right? And, like, there's still... We will probably, by the end of 2022, still be trying to find PS5s, right? Like, their production line isn't getting any better for PS5 or Xbox Series at the moment. So I think people are going to be hard pressed to find these consoles in the same way that there's this little trickle coming through for the next 18 months at least before they're like comfortably on shelves. So to not have Horizon Zero Dawn, Forbidden West and the new God of War kind of accessible by 100 million people is a bad business move. And like, these are both series that coming off the back of things that worked on the PS4, and PS4 Pro did a great job of like running those games. So, that's going to be a very, very comfortable place to play those things.
I heard someone refer to the PS5 as the PS4 Pro, which I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's what it feels like now. And,
yeah.
It's, I mean, you're totally right that there's this situation of the production pipeline and how COVID's impacted everything. It is funny. This comes nearly to the day. On May 30th in 2020, there was news stories going around of an interview with Jim Ryan, who at the time was Sony Interactive Entertainment's boss, who said that they had no interest in making upcoming PS5 games also playable on the PS4, and saying, quote, "We've always said that we believe in generations. We believe that when you go to the trouble of creating a next-gen console, that should include features and benefits that the previous generation does not include. And that, in our view, people should make games that can make the most of these features." He then went on to say later in the interview of like, we also, we have a responsibility to serve the PS4 community as well. And just because we're making a new console doesn't mean that we abandon them. But he did specifically come out and go, our big games will only be playable on PS5. But I do think that even though, like, I'm separating myself as I own a PlayStation 5, so from that I'm inherently like in a privileged position compared to a lot of people who cannot get their hands on it at the moment or can't afford it. And it is slightly disappointing that I feel like I'm not getting something that like is truly tailored for it. But also, I like the fact that other people will be able to experience these games. But as you said, Pete, from a business perspective, it would actually be awful of Sony and compromise the company if they were like, only 7 million people can play these games. Like, I don't know what they're really supposed to do in this scenario. So
yeah, because usually they're right about making these things exclusive to the new platform that is enticing people to go out and get it, right? Like, that's the smart move, is to have like, you can only play the new God of War on the new console, and you can go out and buy yourself a new console. But
only
a
on
year ago
is such a marketed thing that you saw in every console, only on the something, and you're like, okay.
A year ago, that was the roadmap for Sony,
Yeah.
right? Like, there was still like, there's going to be consoles on shelves. We're going to find a way to get them out there. There's going to be consoles on shelves, and we're going to have games exclusive to the PS5. And now that isn't really a possible future for them, where they can entice people to go and get consoles, like the amount of anger in the community of people who just can't get one, and it's like, whose fault is it? No one's really. But
you're
it's
almost
like
doing a disservice, because like by saying it's exclusive, you piss off your community, or you make people angry that that's the only place you put it, and you steer them away from your
it's a pivot,
product.
and it's a good pivot.
Yeah.
And then finally, I will say that I still love my PlayStation 5. Like, I think that I know that there would be people out there who are like, well, I went and bought one, and now I didn't have to. And I think from my perspective, at least, I'm like, but you still have, like, you're still going to get the better version of that game on this console. You're still going to get the features of the PlayStation 5 in backwards compatible games as well. Like, it's not like you suddenly have this thing that doesn't work. You have something that's more powerful than the previous version that you had, that runs everything that your previous version did as well, and will juice up some extra ones. But if it was like you were making a choice between, I'm going to get this, or I'm going to get like a new graphics card for my PC or something, then I can totally see how, like, you go, oh, actually, I got burnt on that decision. So we'll see how long this continues for. Admittedly, though, Sony don't necessarily have a really big roadmap of video games coming out as well. Like, they've got God of War, Gran Turismo, Horizon, and then I'm kind of running out of names of games that we know are coming from Sony that they can even talk about. And I also wonder what the impact on devs is, of like, at what point have they been told, you are going to have to make this backwards compatible, because you are going to have to start stripping back things, or if you're not stripping back, making a version that doesn't have it and a version that does have it.
Have we ever seen in history, like a game that's released as a next-gen game, then get a backwards compatibility made within that like lifetime to be like? Are we going to see are we going to see a Returnal version that's suddenly made for PS4, or like Ratchet and Clank? Like, I'm trying to cast my mind back to think if that's ever happened.
I don't think that's ever been a thing. No.
Yeah, I'm just curious, purely speculating, but I'm just like, if they are looking, as you said, 2022, and we're still going to be like pushing out games for PS4, whether or not they decide to go, hey, let's retroactively make some of these titles available.
Instead of these upgrade patches that we've all been applying, it's a downgrade patch. Yeah. It's just like, you can download it now on your PS4. Yeah, totally. Look, that is definitely something that could happen.
It could only happen in an era
way,
where we can't get the hardware.
With Cyberpunk by accident, in that, like,
yeah, that's true.
In that they released it on the old consoles in a totally unplayable mode, and now are obligated to actually go and fix it. And while it like works okay on the newer consoles and on PC, it's like they're building the last gen platform version of it.
Yeah.
That is like, that's an example of that happening right now, I guess.
And I only say it, as I said, because it's like, this is a weird circumstance to be in where the hardware just can't keep up. And it won't keep up, as we said, for like a couple of years. So that has to be something on their radar now, versus just trying to maximize profits. It's like, there still may be no PS5s in another year and a half. So we'll see where it goes.
And the other reason you didn't need to buy a PlayStation 5 anytime soon is because God of War Ragnarok is getting delayed, which, if you had read any video game news, watched any video game show, or listened to any video game podcast, you probably knew that this was coming. But over the weekend, TIMECODES Studio put out a tweet and confirmed, after a Herman Holst interview where he mentioned that it's going to be delayed, saying, since the release of the next God of War teaser last year, we've been humbled by the amount of love our community has shown us. We're incredibly grateful to see so many people excited to experience the next chapter of Kratos and Arturus' journey. We remain focused on delivering a top quality game while maintaining the safety and well-being of our team, creative partners, and families. With this in mind, we've made the decision to shift our release window to 2022. Thank you all.
Because now we have to make it for PS4 as well.
Yeah, totally. We've got some exciting things in the works that we can't wait to show you. Santa Monica Studio.
Yeah.
Very much so.
We told you that in our fantasy draft at the start of the year, when no one picked it. No one picked a game that is going to get high scores, because we're like, that's not coming out. That's not coming out.
That's so true. That is so what all developers should look at, of like,
Yeah.
Is there faith in your game? Look at video game podcast fantasy drafts. Because let me tell you, as someone who plays a lot of fantasy, you take that shit seriously. And so it is very telling. I have no qualms with this. Go with God of War and make the best game that you possibly can. I also think even if COVID hadn't popped around, this is probably the case as well.
Definitely.
I just feel like
I think so. Yeah.
This is the kind of game that if they say we want to pour more time, effort, and money into, you'd say go for it. Yeah. Don't Ragnaroks. Just let them do their thing.
And then we are going to be getting new IP from Sony Bend. So we spoke about a week or two ago about how the makers of Days Gone, Bend Studio, had pitched to make a sequel, and Sony said, nope, we don't want you to do that. And this was during the whole, are we going to remake Uncharted? No, actually, we're going to remake the first Last of Us game for next-gen consoles. And Bend Studio apparently have a new exciting IP in lieu of a sequel to the biker gang zombie survival game. Herman Holst again didn't offer, and nor was he asked, specifics about Ben's new game, but he did say that the studio is building on the deep open-world systems that they developed for Days Gone. His remarks effectively confirm the information from an April report from Bloomberg, blah, 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 about all the stuff that I just talked about. So Days Gone is gone. Gus?
Look, I think the biggest problem with Days Gone for me was the story and the characters. The open world and the setting, they did such a good job of like a heap of cool systems, and it felt very polished and very put together mechanically. It just, for me, I just wasn't really pulled along by the story and zombies as well. You know, as a big fan, I was fatigued by that. So maybe this is them saying you guys can make a very solid game. You just need something a little more spark in the story department. So if that's the case, I'd be really excited. If it's another take on an apocalypse, or if it's another kind of dark, dusty world with pretty flat characters, I don't know. I hope maybe they just jazz up the writing team. That would be my big takeaway. Did either of you guys play much more of this outside of the first couple of hours?
Nope.
Yeah.
I think I played 8 or 9 hours from memory. I got like decently enough in that I felt like I know what I'm getting for the rest of this game now, and I could have been wrong, but I've never heard of people saying, "Oh my god, the last third of Days Gone is just you have to experience it." So I don't think I was. I'm not too disappointed that we're not getting a second one. I know that game has its fans retroactively, and that it wasn't a bad game. It just felt like you said. It just feels a little uninspired to me, or not even uninspired, but just a bit samey. It was just like, I just feel like I've seen so much of this stuff in video games before. Even if you have come up with a good version of it, I don't know, like you have to come up with the greatest version of that for that to be worth it. But Bender are a really good studio, and so I would be keen, I am keen to see what they've learned from that moving forward.
Open world soccer game.
I would play that. Like, do you mean like you fight with soccer?
Okay. No, you don't fight with soccer. You go and play. There's just a
Can I just say, is Shark Tank? I'm out
game
already.
But the game is actually centered around a 22-year-old middle class kid from Liverpool who makes it into the Premier League, and you just go out and do drugs and punch people in bars. And work with your manager to cover up how much of a shit kid you are, and then go and play football on the weekends.
That's good. I like that.
Could be fun. Peter, I'm back in.
This is a bit like that. This is a bit like that TV show that I pitched. Us. I was like, this is a game that I would like to make. Cool. Okay, good. Well, keep an eye out for that game in 2023. But what you should not expect is for that open world soccer game to come to PC at launch, because the final info drop we got from this story is that Herman Hulse said, while we're still planning, in early planning for our PC plans, and Horizon Dawn has been very successful, I want to emphasize the PlayStation will remain the best place to play our PlayStation Studios titles at launch. But we do value PC.
Place to play the PlayStation.
Yeah, it was a very confusing sentence. And we'll look to continue to look at the right times to launch each game. We want to reach new gamers who haven't yet experienced the great stories, characters, and worlds we've built. Releasing games on PC will not come ever at the expense of building an exciting lineup of great console titles. this is happening at launch, but it could totally happen a month after launch.
And then a year from now, they'll be launching them on PC because there'll be no PS5s, and they'll be like, we always intended to be PC cross-platform on day one.
The best place to play your PlayStation is the PC.
Yeah, PC will get a 7-day early access version that you can play before it launches on console. Yeah, so, you know, they're obviously still working it out, but this is what you say. When you want people to buy your console, you say, hey, there's still a reason to buy this console, even though right now we don't have that many games, and all the games will work on the previous console, and also
you need
all the
to work
games
in
will come to
marketing.
PC at some point as well. So really, there's not a lot of reason to buy this console.
No.
So yeah, a very fruitful and informative interview from Herman Holst. Not necessarily dropping things that can get people excited, but I guess it was a real tempering of expectations across the board. This one.
Yeah.
It felt like something that had to be done. Something that didn't have to be done is what the makers of Injustice 2 Mobile did. And they have since apologized for creating a pride event in their mobile beat-em-up that challenged players to beat up a queer woman. Wesley Yimpool from Eurogamer writes that the developer of Injustice 2 Mobile has apologized for a pride event that challenged players to beat up Poison Ivy, who is canonically a bisexual character within the DC universe, and the mobile version of Netherworld's fighting game has been accused of being tone deaf after an in-game challenge designed to celebrate Pride Month tasked players with defeating Poison Ivy hundreds of thousands of times. And the reward for completing the community challenge included Harley Quinn tokens, which was a nod to Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn's romantic relationship in DC Comics. But it's also something that they got a lot of backlash for, and then came out. Warner Brothers and NetherRealm apologized for the challenge, saying that was insensitive and inappropriate. Quote, real-life violence against the LGBTQIA plus community and women within that community in particular is all too common, and we should actively engage in efforts to end LGBTQIA plus violence, not normalize it. We apologize to the greater community, but especially LGBTQIA plus members. We are committed to listening and doing better. It's just, yeah. It was like good intentions and then just really missed the mark.
That's the thing. The takeaway from this isn't directly the bad, or like what they did wrong. It's the fact that this stuff still happens without that breadth of moment in the company to go, okay, here's our idea. No, this is a bad idea. Like, no one's having that pause, or clearly that self-reflection isn't happening to then think of how this looks publicly. It has to happen retroactively once it's been dropped. And it's like, it's such a bad idea. Yeah, it's such a shocking.
It's one of those things of like, how many desks did this pass over and still get greenlit? No one stopped to go like, hang on a minute.
And
that
also,
seems tone deaf, because it totally is.
Yes.
But how many people were tone deaf in that line? Yeah.
And how many people sitting at those desks were part of the LGBTQIA plus community who I'm quite sure, and I don't know, but I'm quite sure would have gone, I've got a problem with this. Because it is one of those things where, like, I think that it's one of those things where you go, this isn't the worst thing you've done. You didn't do anything actively awful.
Look at the game you made. That's the awful thing.
That's the terrible thing.
Thank you. You've just missed the mark completely. But what's happened is that, like, I'm fairly certain that if anyone involved in the community was there, then they would have seen this. And it is just that thing of, like, because you're not part of that, there are things that you just don't notice. Admittedly, you have a fighting game, so it's like,
anything.
I don't know. I just don't understand why she wasn't the hero. Like,
yeah.
That's a good point.
There's so many,
win this many matches as Poison Ivy. Like,
exactly.
By no means
You're
the
restricted
best way to
to-
do this, but it's the quick knee-jerk reaction way to do it. Or be like, hey, maybe more matchups between Harley and Poison as a sort of nod to, as you said before, just have a matchup. But it's like having to beat her up and win against her is just. It's an absolute shocker of one, but is amazing that those decisions still don't get checked at the door in today's, it's insane.
Wild.
And who's still playing that by the looks of it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was looking for gameplay footage for this morning, and there are some YouTube channels out there. You know how there is just YouTube channels for everything, and there are YouTube channels for games where you're like, I don't even know who plays this game, and then this YouTube channel has like 2.3 million subscribers, and their videos are getting like 600,000 views, and I'm just like, for them, Injustice 2, really good for them. But yeah, the highlight, not beat up. Also, it is one of those things of I think that there's a. We can't. I don't need to go too far into it, but it's that thing of like corporations going into activism, but not genuinely doing it, not actually going like, oh, I want to make something better. It's I want to capitalize on the marketing around this thing, while
there's a trending hashtag on Twitter, we need to be in on that.
Yeah. Totally, and I do remember it was from. When was it? I think it was a couple of years ago, but Marks and Spencer's in the UK, I believe, put out a sandwich during Pride Month, and it was called the LGBT, and it was lettuce, guacamole, bacon, and tomato in sort of rainbow packaging, and it's just like that's terrible. Like you've
sounds like a good sandwich though.
Yeah. It sounds like a great sandwich, Pete. I don't understand why they didn't sell it all year and didn't have to be like, hey, here's our gay sandwich for 1 month. Hopefully we trend on Twitter.
It's such a bad idea, but there's just that initial little spark in your head as you see the two acronyms and think something in marketing. Obviously, people they get that spark and they run with it and they do not stop. And you're like, for a second, you go, oh, I see what they know. It's like, think about it. Check, like, as I said, like the fighter as well, there's just got to be that person who stands in front of them and goes, stop, have a think. Okay, now move forward. And it's just like...
Down, Brad. Speaking of Brads, Brad Chakos from PC World writes about... There's a lot of technical stuff here, and I think that for the sake of me getting this right and everyone's sanity, we should just keep it very top level, Peter Burns. But we're talking about AMD's reveal last week of their Fidelity FX Super Resolution, which is their Radeon DLSS rival, which is significant because there's a lot of really good AMD cards out there right now, and DLSS in NVIDIA cards is really fantastic and potentially going to be a real game changer for adding a lot of power to your machine without having to add a lot of power to your machine. What is significant about this one is it not only does a lot of the same things, but it also even helps make NVIDIA's GeForce GPUs faster as well. So they took the wraps off their Fidelity FX Super Res last week, and it basically promises twice of your graphic card's native performance when you need extra gaming firepower, like activating ray tracing or something, and the ability to make the most recent graphic cards even faster in supported games, even if you're running an NVIDIA card. And it's also coming out this month on the 22nd of June, which is pretty cool. I've sort of tinkered around with DLSS a little bit. It genuinely makes a difference. It's one of the things that if it's coming to the Switch, like there have been some rumors, that is really exciting to me as well. And this one offers 4 levels of quality as well. You can set it to ultra quality, quality, balanced, and performance. And depending on what you do with that is how many extra frames you get. And obviously performance gets the most, and there's some pretty dazzling resolution changes and frame rate changes when you do that. But Pete, is this I can't remember the last time a company came out and was like, here's something that helps us and helps our rival.
AMD do it a bit, actually. FreeSync, I think, was supported by both cards, where G-Sync wasn't.
Yeah, totally. Well, and it actually forced G-Sync to support to go the other way.
Yeah, so AMD are kind of like they're pretty good in that respect. This is great. This is great for particularly older cards to get a little bit more out of them when, same things happening with GPUs as is happening with consoles, is that like it's so hard to get your hands on a new high-end GPU that a lot of people are sitting on last-gen tech and games are still getting better and better and better and better and requiring more grunt. And this is effectively a filter, right? Like it's an Instagram filter. It means you can like tone down your hardware and still like up res to get like a 4K look, and it kind of just like cheats your performance to get better frame rate. And frame rate is really important. You don't want bad frames in any game. The thing that like this doesn't really show is how blurry things are going to be. Like there's a few stills that look really good. There's a little bit of movement in the Godfall thing when they're looking at, but that's like Godfall they're showing off on a 1060 or something like that. That's running the difference between 15 frames and 30 frames or something. So it's like, it's now playable, but it's still like a bit of a bumpy kind of, a bit of a bumpy look. And you can see a bit of blurring and a bit of tearing and stuff. But I think like ultimately,
it's also still Godfall.
Yeah, and it's Godfall, which, you know,
Oh my God.
how is that out? People like I've got a 3090 and I don't think I'd ever turn it on. But for anyone, if I was still on my 1080, absolutely, this is like a thing that you would tune to try and get the most out of your hardware.
So this brings me to my question, which is like how, and just for the Luddite in me, it's like, how do I've got like I think a 1070 Ti, like how do I access this? It's just installing the software and then switching over, or is it just something that runs on top of my current?
Games have to support it.
Right,
So
okay.
Godfall supports it, so that's why it's in the demo. They're hoping, and same as DLSS is like they need the support from the back end as well,
right?
And the developer end. But yeah, in theory, it would be I think you would probably need a driver on your end.
Sure.
Maybe
an
not.
Additional driver or something, but if not, it would be built into the back end of the game settings that I'd turn on, and it's basically AMD providing this software that Apple.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, interesting.
Yeah. If you didn't have an AMD card, then you might need a driver or something
extra. Yeah,
maybe a piece of software, but yeah.
And
Cool.
It's basically very simply using like AI machine learning to figure out how to make your game look better without having to do raw grunt. And the DLSS is very, very good. I've seen sort of mixed reports on what we've seen from this so far. I think that I feel like a lot of the stuff we've seen from people have been people who, you know, have 3080s, 3090s who are running like high-end tech already, and they're like, oh, this is crap. But it is that thing of like, if you're not used to the best and you have something a bit older, then you might put up with a bit of tearing or whatever, because the gains you get without having to spend a fortune will be meaningful enough to you for something like this.
Yeah.
It's my current solution, which is just taking my glasses off occasionally and being like, let's smooth things out.
Now that the whole world is blurry, the game looks fine.
Yeah, and that frame rate's buttery smooth now.
And speaking of non-buttery smooth frame rates, Sonic creator Yuji Naka has left Square Enix after his latest title, Balan Wonderworld, flopped, and he now is considering retirement. Yuji Naka has confirmed his departure from Square Enix on Twitter, saying that he's considering retirement and that while he can't talk about the reason for leaving the company, he hopes he can one day. Quote, I retired from Square Enix at the end of April 2021, and because I would like to contact the media and users. I can't talk about the reason now, but I hope I can talk about it when the time comes. As for future activities, I'm 55 years old, so I may retire. And I'm just like, retire at 55. That's the fucking dream.
Totally. If you can afford to retire, leave.
Absolutely.
Go and do something fun.
He joined Square Enix in 2018 and basically founded Balan Company within Square to make Balan Wonderland. And part of the thing is he'd always wanted to make a platformer, and Square Enix were like, all the reports that were coming out at the time were like, you have one chance. Like, this is it. We're going to give you a bit of money to make the platformer that you want, make it work. And then he made Balan Wonderworld. And the game was a pretty significant flop. There's an IGN article by Joe Screbbles who said that they awarded the game 4 out of 10. Sure. The game never cracked the top 20 selling games in the US, and that the game reached a peak number of concurrent players the day after launch on Steam, according to SteamDB, of just 124 people. And I think we were one of those people.
Possibly.
Because we streamed this game.
I think we did the demo.
We did.
Oh, did we do
that's
the
a good point.
demo?
We did.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah. Okay, then we don't count.
And then I also, wasn't there something about the fact that it sold less than 2,000 copies in its opening week in Japan?
Yeah.
They made a huge mistake putting out that free demo.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
No one who was interested in it all. Like, if you're interested in it, you download that demo and then you immediately lost interest. Yep.
That's so true. I wonder what the thinking behind the demo was. Like, so few games have demos.
Yeah.
It's not something. It's something that we like, but it's not something I think that we expect anymore. And particularly for a game when I'm sure that no one at Square was like, "This is going to be a mega hit."
Yeah. Yes. Look, I mean, I'm sure people who, even if there wasn't a demo, people would have played half an hour and gone like, Steam refund.
Yeah.
So
it's funny as well because it's the polar opposite of not releasing copies before your review embargo. It's like giving copies to the public like months before it even comes out. So yeah, you run the risk of not only finding out what you're like, people getting their fill of the game, but also discovering what that game is, which we did. And I feel somewhat bad for shitting on it so heavily, but now that I see the face behind it, but I'm also like, that's a bad game from the beginning. You should have known that.
You say you feel bad. You mocked it in an earlier story today.
I did, and I will mock it again.
Okay, cool. At least you know you're a shit person. The Melodic Storm in chat said maybe if they called it Balan Wonderland instead.
Or Pigawale name.
Or Pigawale.
That is a real in-joke. All right, that is literally all the video game news that happened this week. It was a bit of slower news week, presumably because we've got E3 and the Summer Games Fest coming up. People are really clamping down and not planning on talking much about video games because next week we're going to be talking a lot about video games. So for the news, there's nothing more you need to know.